Welcome, everybody, to the Grueling Truth Sports Network Inside Boxing Weekly. Going to preview the fights this week. We're going to look at some boxing news and maybe a little old farts corner with the Jerry Quarry, Mike Quarry, the Quarry brothers. As always, the Grueling Truth is powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online sportsbook or casino that's right for you. Make sure you check them out at betting.net. I am your host for Inside Boxing Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, immortal, great boxing author. You can find 3 of his books on Amazon, John Raspanti. How you doing, John?
Doing great, Mike. Thankfully, the check cleared. So thanks for those nice comments. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it.
All right. Yeah. So the check didn't clear, but I still did it anyways. Let's look back at last week a little bit. It's going to be a quick look back as we are going to review Vergil Ortiz, who once again scored a knockout. He had some issues, I guess, since the fight went a little bit deep with McKinson. But McKinson, I was actually impressed with McKinson. He's a tough dude because Vergil Ortiz brings it.
Yeah, he came to win, and that's good. I mean, he was ranked in the top 10. But we talked about it last week. When a guy only has 2 KOs, I mean, that's a major handicap. You got to surprise somebody. You got to do everything awkward. And for him, he did. He's very awkward. And that's what made it hard for Vergil Ortiz. And I think we said that we figured he'd figure him out and eventually stop him. And he did. But the guy who was not impressed was Vergil Ortiz. He said after the fight, I didn't do very well, but he's his hardest critic. And that's good because that means that you're going to keep trying to improve, which everybody can do. But, he's 19-0 with 19 KOs. And him and Boots Ennis are the future of the welterweight division. They're young. They're not like these other guys in their 30s. So not a surprise, obviously. We expected him to win, but it was reasonably impressive. I mean, fighting awkward guys is tough, I'm sure. And he got the job done.
Well, I'd say he should probably start taking people to distance and looking bad if he wants an actual shot at one of the big guys here, because I don't think any of them are going to get near Vergil Ortiz. I think they'll both be at 154 before they do. Of course, I think he's going to be at 154 soon too, though.
He looks pretty big boned. Yeah, no, they don't want Boots Ennis either. Boots is the most talented young fighter right now, at least in that division that I've seen.
Dude, I would rather see Boots against Ortiz than I would Spencer Crawford right now.
Yeah, no, that would be great. That's what they used to do back in the old days, but they don't put the young up-and-comer guys against each other anymore because they don't want to risk it. They figure they're going to lose, and nowadays you can't lose. If you lose, you're basically halfway to retirement. So they won't do it, unfortunately. Wish they would, but yeah, that would be one hell of a fight.
All right, we're going to go ahead. We're going to preview the one fight coming up this week, which is Teofimolopez returning after his December loss to George Kambosos to fight the immortal Pedro Campa. I mean, come on. This is a mismatch, and I think this ends early.
Pedro Martinez. I mean, that's what I thought. Yeah, and this is the first time that...
If he was Pedro Martinez, the Martinez fought, what was the old dude's name? Don Zimmer. That would be a better fight.
Oh, the manager, the big fat guy, Don Zimmer. Yeah, and the Red Sox, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's not much to break down here because when you look, Pedro's best win was beating a guy who was 22-0. His name was, I think, Carlos Sanchez Valdez. And when you look at his resume, it's a very light 22-0.
And he hasn't fought in the United States, right? This is his debut fight in the United States.
Yeah, and other than that win, he had a draw with a solid fighter in Abner Lopez, who I have seen before. I think that was 3 years ago. But he also was stopped by an 11-8-1 Carlos Jimenez in 2017. Yep. And there's not much to see here, I don't think, except the middle round knockout.
Yeah, I think so. And he was also the guy Jimenez who beat him is now 14-10 his record. So how revealing is that? We'll see on Saturday. Yeah, they know what they're doing. They want Teofimo to look good. They want Teofimo to score a knockout, and that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, and where would Teofimo go after this?
Well, he's got a lot of guys he wants to fight. I'd love to see him fight Josh Taylor if Josh was to stay at 140. I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, my guy Regis Prograis is also a nice option. I would love to see the Rougarou against Teofimo. He's going to keep going up, Mike. I think in a year or two he'll probably be a welterweight. He's a pretty big bone kid, but I'm also wondering about that esophagus problem that was revealed right after the fight. Is that still an issue? I haven't heard one person say that anything about it. I mean, they were saying that he could have died when he fought Kambosos. So how is his health? I would assume that it's okay.
Well, all I know is this
ultimate excuse. Who knows?
Yeah, I think almost anybody that's ever lost a fight almost died.
Yeah, well, that was a hell of a fight, and it was an upset, yes, but Kambosos was really determined, and Teofimo was figuring he'd knock him out in the first round, if we remember. So maybe he learned something from that, not to be so conceited about all his fights. He's a very confident young man. It's pretty obvious, but we expect him to win. He's talking about Haney. I mean, Haney wants to move up to 140. How about him against Ryan Garcia?
I don't think Garcia will fight him.
No.
But my other thing is Bob Aaron mentioned the winner of Josh Taylor and Jack Cottrell, the rematch, or Catterall, whatever.
Catterall, yeah.
And, I mean, the thing about that, they still got to have the rematch. And now today I saw that Josh Taylor is supposed to use a mandatory, I think, for the IBF title or something. I don't really follow the alphabet organizations. And this is why, because Taylor and Catterall should be fighting because Taylor may have lost to Catterall when you look at it. So right there, if you've got to get through a mandatory, I mean, hell, then you're looking at the middle to end of next year before he can fight Taylor. Devin Haney looks like he's fighting November or December, the rematch against Kambosos. So a lot of these guys are taken up, and Lomachenko, it looks like they want Haney and Lomachenko to probably fight early to mid next year after Haney takes apart Kambosos again. So Regis Prograis is the one guy here that looks available, but I don't think that's going to happen. Ryan Garcia is available, but I'll believe Ryan Garcia or Tank Davis is going to fight somebody when they finally fight somebody.
Yeah, see, Tank Davis is also available. So come on now. I think Tank is more available to fight than Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan talks more than.
Well, I think this though. I don't think Tank's problem is whether he wants to fight. It's whether the people that control him will allow him to fight.
Yeah, supposedly he's a free agent, but it doesn't seem that way, does it? It seems like they're in the back, like he's a puppet, and they're pulling strings. And I wish he'd just tell them, look, I'm fighting this guy, and that's the way it is. He wanted independence, from what I understand. That's why he's trying to get away from Floyd Mayweather, but doesn't appear that it's really happening yet.
All right, real quick, I want to bring up it's not just sports betting. Betting.net compares the best online casinos, so sit back, relax, and play the top online slots, poker, and table games. Check out betting.net. All right, now, on his 34th birthday, Tyson Fury has announced his retirement until next week. So, when we look at this, 2 or 3 days ago, I wrote an article because he was all jacked up to fight Derek Chisora, which, I mean, he might as well retire. I would actually rather see him, if he was going to retire, at least fight Chisora so Chisora could get paid one more time. But, I mean, this is getting ridiculous because this is a weekly thing. And I do note this. The one thing I do notice is whenever Anthony Joshua has a fight coming up, Tyson Fury constantly talks, whether it's talking about retirement, talking about now he's coming back. You know, I don't think he likes the fact that Anthony Joshua, even though Joshua is nowhere near Fury's skill level, he hasn't accomplished what Fury has, I guess. Anthony Joshua is still the man when it comes to heavyweights in England. And I think that bugs the shit out of Tyson Fury.
Yeah, he likes attention, obviously. And when someone else is getting the attention, like Anthony Joshua, who I don't think he likes, he's a dozer, right? Like everybody else, like the rest.
Everybody's a dozer.
But he's on the top of the list, I think. So
until they fight, and then he'll talk about how great of an athlete Anthony Joshua was and how tough he was.
He's a hell of a promoter. He this kind of just made me roll my eyes because I thought, God, Tyson, you're retired today. Everybody's laughing at you. You know, do you need the attention so bad that you're going to announce your retirement again after all this Derek Chisora talk? And I was just thinking, nobody wants to see that. I agree with you that it would be nice for Chisora to get one last big payday, but Still, that's just him. He's another guy that I think, I kind of believe in horoscopes a little bit. Leos, and he's a Leo, tend to want that attention, and he wants it, and he likes it, and I think Aram said that he likes to play with the media, and obviously he does. He was playing with them for days. He said he had a new trainer for this Chisora thing, and he's kind of a puzzle, but I think that's just because he's half nuts, to be honest. But he's entertaining and he's fun, and obviously he can fight. So if he does retire, will I miss him? I don't know. I'd like to see him fight.
How about this? We'll miss him because he's one of the few heavyweights with any skill level, and we'll miss him because he's supposed to fight the winner of next week's battle.
Well, I think he is. I don't care what he says. I think he'll announce his retirement, and then if Usyk wins or Joshua pulls a surprise, he's in. Especially if it's Joshua. I mean, he'd fight Usyk too, but if it's Joshua, I'm not retired. I was joking. Yeah, let's do it, Anthony Joshua. I mean, that's such a huge fight. So he's playing around again. He's not 100% retired. We know that. And I think, like Aram, I agree with Aram. Aram said he'd come back to fight the winner of that. And why not? Either of those guys, he can beat both of them. So why not come back and fight him?
Well, actually, I think Usyk would probably. I mean, I could see him retiring if it's Usyk. I could see him not messing with Usyk.
Well, Usyk would obviously be a more difficult fight, but he's so much bigger and everything. I think he'd find a way, but Usyk would trouble him. No doubt about it. And from what I've been seeing and hearing, Usyk has really built himself into a very sturdy heavyweight.
Oh, if you look at pictures of him now, he looks legit like a heavyweight.
Yes, indeed. But he's got that other quality that we like. He's a good athlete. He's fast. He's good on his feet. He's got great footwork like Lomachenko. He's pretty fast hands, and he's very smart in there. So anybody that fights him now, more now than ever, I think, is going to have trouble, especially if he's having a good night. If he's struggling a little bit like he did against Chisora, he couldn't quite get off right. He won, but if he's like he was the first Anthony Joshua fight or whatever, when he's primed, it'd be tough. I still think Fury would beat him, but it wouldn't be easy.
All right. Let's get off the Tyson Fury thing because we could talk next week on the show about how he just announced he's coming back to fight the winner. We do have an interesting fight over the UK. We've got Eubank versus Benn. I guess this is the third fight. Their fathers did it in 1990 and 93, I believe. And, I mean, this is an interesting matchup because they're two guys, especially with Benn. We don't know how good Benn is. We know Eubank is at least a decent fighter. But I think the backstory here in the UK with Eubank versus Benn, the sons fighting, makes this a huge fight. At least in the UK, it makes it a huge fight. And I'm really surprised that it's not being done in a stadium.
Yeah, that is surprising because they'd sell. God, they'd probably sell out in a stadium. I mean, I'm surprised too. Sons of legends, both of them, and both good fighters. And Ben, you're right. Ben is a question mark. He's good. I mean, he knocked out Algieri, and no one had done that. Now no one ever called Chris a great fighter, but I mean, he knocked him cold.
Well, Chris is a little old too.
Right, we knew that. Chris is older, sure, but I mean, it was a vicious knockout. I saw Ben in the life or death fight when he was earlier in his career, and he ended up getting knocked down a couple times and getting up both times, winning. He was very raw. He's improved a lot, so we just don't know when he fights a guy who's going to fight him back hard what happens. Eubank, he was just such a enigma again. He didn't have his own trainer. He had this whole whole arrogance thing going on, and his dad is out there somewhere too. So
hopefully his dad doesn't lead him into the ring while they play simply the best, and he walks out by himself, and then his son comes after him.
Exactly. I mean, I couldn't figure out how much of it was true or not. I think some of it was true. Eubank was he's training himself, and I just don't. You need somebody to help you in boxing. I do. He didn't listen to anybody. Then he went back to Vegas. Maybe he learned something, especially when he lost to George Groves. So he's a good fighter. He's a tough dude. He's lost to Billy Joe Saunders and George Groves, right? So he's good. He's older. Ben is the younger guy by quite a bit, I think, maybe 10 years. I didn't check that. I don't know how old. I think it's maybe around there. So, yeah, I'm intrigued by this fight. And you know that I'm going to write an article for the Grueling Truth about this fight because there's a lot of stuff going on. And with the fathers in the background, hell yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and the thing is, the fight's going to happen at 156 with a hefty $100,000 per pound fine for each fighter if they come in above that weight.
Well, you don't come. I would think they're going to make weight reasonably easy. I would think that they're both motivated.
I think if that weight affects either one, of course, it affects Eubank more than it does Benn because Eubank's fought as high as super middleweight.
Yeah, he's coming down for sure, and yeah, he might be a little weakened by that. Then again, maybe not. I mean, he must think he's going to be okay. He hasn't fought in a while. He doesn't fight very much. Very, very strange career again, just like his whole persona. So I was when they were down, we were playing around with this, announcing this fight or talking about it. I was like, really, Eubank? And it's like, well, what's he going to do? He was trying to fight Golovkin for a while, and Golovkin went, and then he was going to fight. Said something about Charlo. So I mean, he's got to fight Benn because he doesn't have any other options. All
right. We're going to move on to another fight that I think is intriguing, which was just announced in December. Estrada Gonzalez 3. They did it in 2012. They did it about a year ago. Both fights were great fights. Yep. And, I mean, this is a fight that's good for boxing, which we don't get very often. I think Ben Eubank is good for boxing also.
Yeah, I actually thought Gonzalez won the second fight. I thought he edged Estrada. I didn't get annoyed that Estrada got the decision, but I thought Chocolatito won the second one. And the fact, see, Chocolatito is another great story, Mike, because, when he got knocked out by Rundasai a few years ago.
He's done.
Right. He's done. He looked done. And he's come, and it's like, you got to retire, man. All these fights you had, you're getting pounded. He comes all the way back and wins the title again and has looked pretty good. Obviously, not when he was in his prime, but he's not in his prime anymore. So he still looked good. He looked real good against Estrada. So, and Estrada obviously is very good. So, this is a great fight. This is a can't-miss fight. It's going to be all action. They might touch gloves in the first round and then go at it. That's the kind of fight this will be.
Yeah, it's always good to watch guys like that fight. We don't get to see that very often anymore. And also, we don't have to talk about the guys having long layoffs either.
Now, the little guys almost always bring it. But right before we do the old farts thing, I remember the little guys. It was the same thing back when I was a kid. You had Ruben Oliveras and you had Danny Lopez and you had all these Bobby Chacon. They're a little bigger than those guys, but especially Oliveras, Jesus Pimentel, Chuchu Castillo. I mean, those guys, every time they fought, and if they fought at the Olympic or at the Fabulous Forum, wherever it was in Southern California, you knew what you were going to get. It was always going to be great.
All right. So you already previewed a little. We got the old farts corner, which especially on a week like this, where the news is stupid for the most part with Tyson Fury. The fight is weak with Lopez and Campa. We did get to announce 2 good fights, so we're going to go to the old farts corner. And right before we do that, remember the old farts corner is powered by betting.net, which finds the best promotions, offers a bonus code so you don't have to. Head over to their website now to take advantage of free bets and matching deposits. All right, we're going to talk to Quarry brothers. Jerry Quarry, we'll start off with. Jerry Quarry is one of my favorites. And I've watched the film of most of Jerry Quarry fights. Jerry Quarry is a guy that there are many times in the last years he was fighting then in his prime. He'd have been a heavyweight champion of the world.
Yeah, he was just unlucky when he was fighting because there was just so many good fighters in his day. And it's so opposite of now, Mike. He wasn't a big heavyweight. He was in the 190s when he was in his prime. And he was a really good fighter, and he doesn't get the credit I think he deserves. You watch the first Frazier fight, the first round.
It's like Hagler Hearns.
Yeah, he looked great. I mean, he hit Frazier with everything at the kitchen sink, and he buzzed them a few times, I'm sure. But he couldn't maintain it. Who could? Because Frazier just keeps getting more and more smoking as the fight goes on. I mean, it was toe-to-toe the whole fight. he just was an unlucky guy in a lot of ways. And the Quarries, with what happened to them, their family, almost like cursed, with the early deaths and everything. Not just Jerry, another brother. Just, I don't know. It was just, but my grandfather loved him. He was one of his favorite fighters because obviously he was from Southern California, and he fought at the Olympic numerous times. And Jerry was charismatic and funny. I mean, he did the best Muhammad Ali you probably ever hear, maybe even better than Billy Crystal, and also a very, very talented fighter. If he'd been around, a few years later, he definitely would have won the heavyweight title. He should have won the title when he fought Jimmy Ellis. That was for the WBA crown. Should have been the winner of that fight, and then he could have at least been the heavyweight champion because he was good enough to be a heavyweight champion.
Yeah, this is the guy that beat Floyd Patterson, lost him the first time, beat him in a rematch, beat Thad Spencer. And what you're talking about is when they made Ali vacate the title, they had a tournament to win the championship. Yep. He beat Floyd Patterson. He beat Thad Spencer. And then he lost a majority decision to Jimmy Ellis, which was, Ellis was a 7-5 underdog coming in. I think they both made, for Rita, like 100, 150 grand. And the thing that I remember reading about this when I read it was that the LA Herald, like in August of that year, several weeks before the Ellis fight, said that Quarry actually broke his back in a friendly wrestling match with one of his brothers. And they didn't know about it till a few days before the fight when they did an x-ray of it.
Yeah, and also in the excellent book on Jerry by Blake Chavez and another writer that I can't remember, they said that they didn't say it was wrestling. They said he was goofing around, jumping around from train to train in Oakland and hurt his back. I think that's right. You might be right about what you said, but whatever.
It's hard telling either way. So
yeah, whatever. The story is he came into that fight with a really bad back. And if anyone knows what it's like to have a bad back, you and I know, but to imagine boxing somebody when your back is killing you, you're not going to be yourself. And maybe that's why he wasn't as aggressive. I remember reading that the complaints was Jerry was a counterpuncher anyway. He kind of waited sometimes. He was waiting too much. And Jimmy Ellis just kind of outboxed him a little bit and edged him. Fight could have went either way. He didn't, if he was his usual self, he might have had more intensity in there and fought harder to win. But, we're never going to know. It's unfortunate. It would have been great if he had won the fight, but just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, then after that, he did what most heavyweights do today. He fought a bunch of guys we never heard of, but then that led up to a fight against Buster Mathis, where Jerry was actually the underdog. Mathis was 29-1 or something at that point. And Quarry dominated. He knocked him down in the second round. I think the 12-round decision, I think the judges all were in the 9-3 to 10-2 range. And that's what led up to his shot at, I think it was at the time, John, wasn't it just the New York State heavyweight title?
Right.
Against Joe Frazier. And that was a fight that barely even for 3 or 4 rounds. The problem was, I think Frazier was just a little stronger, in a little bit better shape, and ended up stopping him in the 7th round.
Yeah, that's the fight of the year. Both times they fought, it was fight of the year because it was just grueling and brutal.
Yeah, but I think this one was more competitive than the second one.
Right. The second one got away from Jerry pretty quickly, but the first one, he was right there with him. Looked great for a few rounds, and Joe just kept smoking. And then Frazier was just, and most people know this, he had levels, and you wanted to get him early if you were going to get him, if you could hurt him, knock him down or something, because he was like a train. And he would get faster and start smoking more and more as each round progressed. And by round 4 or 5, he was pounded on Quarry, who could take it. He had a great chin, never was knocked out. He was stopped, sure, but he was never knocked out, as you would say in boxing. Stopped, yes, totally different thing. And he got pounded and cracked by those left hooks, and those were brutal punches. So, he just couldn't go that same speed that Frazier was going, and he stopped him and lost. But certainly not an embarrassment or anything like that. I mean, that's smoking Joe Frazier.
Yeah, then he fought George Chuvalo, and Chuvalo stopped him.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
At the end of the 7th round, what I remember about this was Quarry got knocked down, and if I remember right, I think he was trying to get up at the 9 count.
Yeah.
And he ended up just a split second late.
Yeah.
But this is a fight, when you look at the scoring of this fight through 6 rounds, it was 4-1-1 by one judge, 4-1-1 by the other, and 3-3 even, which I've actually seen this fight. I haven't. It's silent, but I do have the fight. There's no way it was a 3-3 fight because I thought Quarry was winning the fight. But it was a hell of a fight, as you can imagine, with Quarry and Chuvalo, but a weird ending.
Yeah, he lost track of the count or something, or he didn't hear whatever, and he got up a split. He wasn't staying down. You know, you could say that about Jersey Joe Walcott and against Rocky Marciano, how he suddenly gets all active right at the 10 count, you know, and it's like, I don't really think he wanted to beat the count. Not the same thing with Jerry. Yeah, he went down. It was a legitimate knockdown. He wasn't really hurt, though. He wasn't buzzed. And he just somehow got up a split second too late. It was very odd. And I remember him getting ripped in the media for that. And it hurt his career, you know, because he was supposed to beat Chuvalo. And as you said, he was beating him. And then he just made a mistake and didn't beat the count. And that's what it looks like on his record. He was stopped by George Chuvalo, and he was winning that fight. I remember that. So that was one of those head scratchers where, like, well, how could you? Well, you know, those things happen, I guess.
All right. Then Quarry fought Mac Foster. Mac Foster was 15, 20 pounds bigger than Quarry. And Mac Foster came into this fight 24-0, 24 knockouts. And I've got this fight also. And Quarry absolutely broke Foster down with left hooks to the body, especially around the 4th or 5th round, sending him sprawling in round 6 before he finally stopped him. And a lot of people thought Mac Foster may be the next big thing until Jerry Quarry stepped up and fought him.
Yeah, Jerry was an underdog going into that one. Again, I remember it very well. And he was supposed to lose, according to the experts. And he just dominated, and he looked great in that fight. He did. And Mac Foster, Mac Foster was the one. He was the man. He was the next heavyweight champion. He was gonna beat Muhammad Ali. He was gonna beat whoever else, Joe Frazier. And Jerry Quarry just showed you when he was on, how good he was, and he did that was a textbook breakdown knockout, and it was a knockout, I believe. He knocked him down, and he was out. So yeah, that was one of the highlights of his career, undoubtedly, because again, he was the underdog. People forgot this is it. He's just getting this last payday. He's cashing out. Nope, not so.
And then he fights Muhammad Ali October 26th in Atlanta. This was Ali's comeback fight after a 3-year exile because of the United States government. And Ali cut Quarry in the 3rd round bad enough that the fight was stopped before there was ever a 4th round. And this is a fight, really, if you watch it, it wasn't like Muhammad Ali destroyed Jerry Quarry. Quarry was in the fight a little bit. I mean, he lost all 3 rounds, but it didn't look like he was getting, destroyed in this fight. It was just the cut, and that was the MO of Quarry.
Yeah, my dad always told me that he thought that Muhammad Ali was getting a little tired in the 3rd round, and then
that's the same thing my dad told me, but my dad loved Ali. So you never know.
My dad loved Ali to a degree, not as much as me, but he did. But he saw that he was an outside salesman at that. Well, he was an inside and outside salesman. He was on a trip and he watched it from his hotel room, and he told me he thought that Ali was getting tired and Quarry was starting to come on, and he would have liked to have seen what would have happened if the fight had continued. He didn't think that Ali wouldn't have won. He just thought that Quarry was starting to do better. And unfortunately, and you remember the fight when the fight was called, Quarry was really, really unhappy about it because I think he thought that he was starting to do a little better. And I think that's what led up to their rematch 3 years later. But Ali looked good in that fight. The first couple of rounds, I mean, he looked like he did in the mid 60s. I don't think he didn't look that good when he fought Oscar Bonavina. And at times he looked good against Joe Frazier. But, that 3.5 years, that hurt him. That hurt him quite a lot. Think about laying off.
The thing that's impressive is this. After 3 years of being in prison, Mike Tyson fought Peter McNeely.
Yes.
After 3 years in exile, Muhammad Ali fought Jerry Quarry, who I think Quarry was the number 1 contender at the time.
He was. Craziness, but it was just different in those days.
Ali was different. And
right,
that's the other thing. I was thinking about this the other day because I was watching something. They had Elvis Presley on YouTube. And they're talking about, still to this day, every year, on average, 600,000 people go to Graceland.
Yeah.
And you look at Muhammad Ali and the way, I mean, when's the last time we had an athlete like that? I mean, Tom Brady is huge, but he's not like that. Michael Jordan was huge, but not like Ali. And really, even in celebrity now, whether they're actors or anything else or singers, there's nothing like Elvis Presley. And I think we were really lucky that we grew up in the 60s and 70s where there were iconic figures like this that struck a chord with everybody all over the world, not just in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Ali, I think Ali and Elvis Presley were friends. And Elvis gave him a robe. I don't know what fight it was. I can't remember. If I would have usually remembered, but I can't. But they were friends. And
it might have been the Bob Foster fight, but I'm not 100% sure.
That certainly, that right around that time is what I'm thinking. And you're right. I mean, Ali and Elvis were international. You know, a lot of these guys are more famous in a smaller type way. Ali, everybody knew Muhammad Ali.
I mean, who's the most famous person that's ever existed? I mean, number one is Jesus. Number two is Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, exactly. And he just, that's him. I mean, the same thing with Elvis. I mean, they were both extremely charismatic and likable, and they were different. That was part of it too. And people loved them and still love them to this day. And that says something, you know. Elvis has been dead since 1977, right? So the fact that he's still in this movie was supposed to be pretty good. The fact that he is still so internationally popular tells you that whatever he had, and he was obviously talented, he could sing extremely well, and he wasn't nearly as bad an actor as people like to say.
He was just in bad movies.
Yes, and that's his fault and Tom Parker's fault, because when he had a chance to play a straight role, well, when he played what is it called, Flaming Star? See, there we go again.
Flaming Star.
Was it Flaming Star? Yeah, he's excellent. So it's unfortunate that the other one, King Creole.
King Creole.
He played. He was.
Oh, he was in a boxing movie too, wasn't it? Kid Galahad.
Kid Galahad with Charles Bronson and Gig Young, and not a very good movie, but you know, Elvis was good, and Gig Young was a little background information, Mike. Gig Young was jealous of Elvis because Elizabeth Montgomery, you know, Bewitched, had come to the set and she was bewitched by Elvis. And he was not happy about it. So if you watch that movie and you notice a little bit of animosity with it, at least all on Gig Young's part, not on Elvis's part, he was not acting. He was very annoyed that his wife was looking at Elvis like, whoa. So, you know, that movie background history. So, but you're right. The point is that those guys, they 100 years from now, if this world is still here, they'll still be talked about. And that is amazing that two people could do that.
Well, those two and Evel Knievel.
Well, right now, that's another guy that I love too, Evel Knievel. So
yeah, we grew up about the same time. So it was those three guys. All right, then Ali rematch with Quarry, 1972. And this is the Soul Brothers versus the Quarry Brothers, because you had Bob Foster defended against Mike Quarry in the undercard. And he had Ali Quarry in the main event. This was not a good night for the Quarry Brothers. This was obviously won by the Soul Brothers. Bob Foster, one of the most devastating knockouts of Mike Quarry. I think it was in the fourth round that you'll ever see. And then Ali, unlike the first fight where it looked like Quarry might be getting his feet, that second fight, Ali had been fighting for a while. And it was, to me, it was a mismatch. Ali won every round.
Yeah, one-sided. And I was watching too, and I was watching when Bob Foster knocked out Mike Quarry out. When he went down like that, I thought, God, I hope he gets up. You know, that was brutal. He was knocked cold. And now that's a knockout right there. And Quarry was 35-0 when he came into that fight, if you remember, Mike. And he just couldn't punch very hard. He was a good boxer, but he'd like to get in and go toe-to-toe, even though he couldn't punch very hard. When he boxed, he would usually win, but he was not disciplined enough to stick to that. He wanted to rumble. That was just in his blood, you know, like he idolized his brother, and he knew his brother rumbled. I mean, when they used to spar, Bill Kaplan told me that, you know, Mike is smaller and Jerry's a bigger guy, you know, by 20 or 30 pounds, and they wouldn't spar, they'd fight. And Jerry would crack Mike with punches. And I remember Bill told me, somebody said that, Jerry, you gotta, you know, take it easy, Mike? And he goes, why? Brothers, I don't know. But yeah, when he got knocked out, I was glad he got up. And then the Ali Quarry fight was just it was Ali dominated. And what I remember of it was when he had him on the ropes and he was hitting him with shots, he just said to the referee, that's it. Put his glove up and went, nope, I'm not doing it. It's over. He said the fight was over, and the referee agreed.
Yeah, so, anybody that watched agreed. Really, Jerry Quarry probably agreed too, if you ask him for serious.
Yeah.
And after that, maybe people think he's done, but then he beats the old ref, Randy Newman, beats Ron Lyle, knocks out Ernie Shavers in the first round.
Yes.
And the Ernie Shavers fight was devastating. He dominated that. And that led to his rematch with Smoking Joe Frazier in 1974. And neither one of these guys really what they were, but I think Frazier had a lot more left in Quarry by this time.
Yeah, the Ron Lyle fight, Mike, another one. Like we talked about Mac Foster, Quarry is going to lose. He's not going to beat Ron Lyle. Ron Lyle is an up-and-coming heavyweight who's going to knock out Jerry Quarry. Instead, Quarry dominates.
And he easily beat Lyle. Yeah.
Yes. Not expected. And Ernie Shavers, the knockout artist, I mean, anybody can watch that fight on YouTube. Ernie hit him with some hellacious shots, but Jerry turned it around and started hitting him. And as we know, Ernie didn't have the strongest chin. Might have the strongest punch, but not chin. And Jerry knocked him out. So he was the guy that was like a cat in some ways. He didn't have 9 lives, but he had made these little comebacks like this. But then, of course, it led to the second one with Joe Frazier, and then he fought Kenny Norton. And
yeah, the worst one to me, and I remember watching this one. I was like 9 or 10 years old. Was against Lorenzo Zanon.
Oh,
and I mean Zanon won every. Yeah, I think it was 77, but Zanon won almost every round. Not every round. Yeah.
Quarry was so done then that it was ridiculous, and he stopped him though. He couldn't do anything really. Barely could throw a punch, but he got him in the corner. I remember, and then started pounding him, and he hit him. He still had a heavy punch, and down went Lorenzo, and he won. And it was just, but it was like a victory that you're happy that he won, but that no, he's not even close. He's just a shadow of his old self.
Well, if I remember right, he retired after that. Of course, he came back in the early 80s, and then somehow somebody gave him a boxing license in the freaking early 90s, which was an absolute joke. And then we'll talk about Mike a little bit, Mike Quarry, because Mike Quarry was a good boxer.
He was.
When you look at his career, he fought, I think Mike Raspanti 2 or 3 times. And Raspanti was a good fighter. I know the one fight was a majority decision loss. Yeah. He got stopped by Raspanti another time. Of course, you had the title shot against Bob Foster. And I think he did beat Raspanti their first fight, if I remember correctly. And then I think you had a unanimous decision loss to Yaki Lopez. And all of this was after the devastating knockout with Bob Foster in 1974, I believe, or 72.
72. Yeah, 72. Yeah. No, he. If you look at the scoring, his losses they were close. Like Yaki Lopez, they were 5-4, and they were close with the other fighters that you mentioned. But after that knockout, he obviously wasn't the same guy. I mean, he just couldn't punch hard enough, and if he boxed, he'd win a lot of fights. But I told you he preferred to rumble, and then as he kept going, it just wears him down. I remember he got knocked out by a guy named Pete McIntyre, I think, and that was much later than you're mentioning. And it was like,
I remember Pete McIntyre.
He was, well, me too, but Mike wasn't supposed to lose to Pete McIntyre, even at that point in his career. But especially like that.
Yeah, he got knocked out, didn't he? If I remember right.
Yes, he did. I think it was in San Diego or something. It was really a surprise. So yeah, he was like his big brother. He kept fighting and fighting and fighting and losing. And then when he couldn't fight anymore, he'd go to a bar and get into fights with guys. I mean, it's a really tragic story. Both of them are tragic. Mike might be more. They both died young. Mike was 55 and Jerry was 53. And those guys were so alive when I was younger. And you're younger than me, but man, they were like big not
See,
superstars, but
the
they're like,
interesting thing I remember about Pete McIntyre, because what the hell? Where else are you going to hear people talk about Pete McIntyre? But Pete McIntyre, I remember because I believe after Braxton had beaten Huawei or after Braxton had beaten Saad Muhammad, Matthew Saad Muhammad was one of my favorite fighters. After those
me
two
too.
beatings, he gave Saad Muhammad. Pete McIntyre is a guy that Saad Muhammad, I think, knocked out in like the second round in 1982 or 83. The interesting thing about Pete McIntyre, now, you look at his record, it looks terrible. But he had back-to-back wins. His win before he beat Mike Quarry, if I remember right, was against Yaki Lopez. And a couple fights later, after he lost to Marvin Camel, which I remember this because I looked it up because I interviewed Marvin Camel on our Legends of Boxing show. But he had a run where he beat Yaki Lopez, which is a rematch because Lopez had knocked him out 2 years before. But he beats Lopez. He beats Mike Quarry. He loses a fairly semi-close decision to Marvin Camel, who was a damn good fighter. Then he beat Jesse Burnett. He beat Bash Ali. And Bash Ali was a guy who I think fought for the cruiserweight title at one point.
Yeah, see, now that's quite a list. So maybe we ought to give Pete his
and there's a lot of wins there too.
Yes,
you know,
Pete deserves his due there, and yeah, he was fighting everybody.
For whatever, I think he also beat Eddie Davis. Eddie Davis was a good light heavyweight.
Those are Eddie Davis fought for the world title, right? So
yeah,
these are guys.
Eddie and Johnny. I think they were brothers, weren't they? Or were they?
I think so.
Eddie also beat Willie Edwards.
See, now I know all those names. I remember all those guys, and they were all in the top 15, I would say, easily.
Yeah,
they weren't
Eddie Edwards at the time, I think, was ranked because I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think that fight was at the end of 82, and it was on the undercard of Hearns and Benitez. It was like the first fight that was shown, because after that, and that was a great show because you had Hearns Benitez, which actually ended up being a pretty damn good fight. And right before Hearns Benitez, you had, I think it was Lupe Pintor against Wilfredo Gomez.
I'm sure that was a great fight.
Like that anymore.
Lupe Pintor again.
Oh, that was a great fight. Gomez, I think, stopped him in the 14th, and that was right after Gomez had lost to Salvador Sanchez. But then the end of McIntyre's career, he almost pulled off one more upset because he lost a really close split decision to J.B. Williamson. The interesting thing about that is this. Do you know who the only judge was that scored Pete McIntyre beating J.B. Williamson?
No.
Armando Muniz had it 96-95. Did you know that? There you go. And the other interesting thing is the other judges, the two judges that scored it for Williamson were Robert Byrd and Lou Moret.
Well, those are known guys, and Robert Byrd he's got some controversy in his background.
They all suck. There's not a boxing referee I would imagine the reason that Armando was no longer allowed to be a judge is probably because he didn't suck.
He what? Didn't hear you.
Because he didn't suck.
Yeah, because he was too good. He was too honest. Yeah. He wasn't. Nobody could push him in a direction to score a fight. He's got integrity, and that's not good. We don't want that. No,
integrity has no place in boxing. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead. We're going to wrap the show up for this week. We will have Usyk Joshua 2 preview. When do you want to do that? Do you want to do it during the day, or you want to do a live show in the evening one day next week?
We can do a live show if that's what you think works.
Could you do 9 o'clock, which would be 6 o'clock your time on Thursday?
Yes.
All right. Sure. Next Thursday at 9 o'clock, we will have the preview for Usyk Joshua. We may have a special guest too. I'm going to give Michael Montero a call, see if he wants to come on with us.
You get Pete McIntyre on.
We could get Pete McIntyre. Is he still alive?
I don't know, but
if you can find him, let's have him on the show, because until you brought that name up, I'd forgotten all about him. And then I remembered when I looked at Marvin Camel's record, because I remembered Pete McIntyre from losing to Saad Muhammad. And then I remembered he opened that card up with Hearns and Benitez as the main event. So
yeah, see, you jogged my memory, and I forgot some of the guys he had beat. So that beating Mike Quarry like he did really wasn't. It was considered an upset, but maybe it wasn't that much of an upset.
Because he beat Yaki Lopez right before that. So.
Right. So Mike was coming down at that point and losing a lot more, and he should have already retired. They were telling him everybody wanted to retire, but he would not. So yeah.
Does seem to be an issue with the Quarry family.
Exactly. And if you think about it, the sad thing about Mike Quarry was that it wasn't like he was that old when this was going on. He retired when he was like 30 years old, 31 years old. And he had 75 fights, if I remember correctly. And
the problem was the guys that they both fought. I mean, they didn't duck anybody.
No, they fought everybody. And so 30 years old, he's an old, how we used to say, and he's way past it. He would have been done for 2 or 3 years. But I mean, that's the thing I've always tried to explain to people that, and I think they get it, is try to imagine if you love something and you're 29 years old or whatever, 30 years old, and you're being told you have to stop.
Yeah.
And you love it. What are you going to do? It's what you're about. It's your identity. It makes you feel good. And now you're like, nope, you can't do it anymore. Well, when you be walking around going, well, what am I going to do now? And people are, I got to retire. It's not that easy. It's not that simple.
No. But, all right, Joshua Usyk, too, next week. Right. Old Farts Corner. What do you want to do next week for Old Farts Corner?
Well, I had said Muhammad Ali just because it's a heavyweight thing, but we mentioned him. We talked about him a little bit this week. If you want to just talk about, I think we ought to talk about heavyweight. So if you want to stick to the 70s or maybe move to the 80s, whatever works. I like that period in the 70s just because there were such good fighters.
So and they fought one, and we'll go with it.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
But, all right, guys, make sure you check us out on Twitter. Follow us at @grueling_truth. If you followed us before, follow us again. We now have a new Twitter page. We lost our 27,000 followers because you can't talk to anybody at Twitter when there's an issue with your Twitter. So you're kind of screwed there. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, check out the recommended sportsbook for betting on this weekend's fights, and that would be, what sportsbook do you think it is, John? You got to guess.
Betting.com. I don't know.
Oh, come on. Jeez. I don't know what the hell you're talking about half the time as you get older.
But betting.net. How about
no, that's not a betting website. Betting.net. It's good that you brought that up, though, because if you live like in California, you really can't bet anywhere. But
right,
if you live in a state like I live in Indiana, when you go on betting.net, it will only give you sites you can legally bet on and the links to go directly to those sites and ratings for all those sites. So make sure you check out betting.net. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. For John Raspanti, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth.